So to start things off this morning, it is my honor to introduce Holly Ham. She is Assistant Secretary for Management at the Department of Education. Assistant Secretary Ham leads a senior team that manages a broad operations portfolio that serves all employees and contractors in support of the department's mission. Prior to joining the federal government, Assistant Secretary Ham had an extensive career in private enterprise focused on enabling technology to increase organizations' productivity. She spent the early part of her career as a management consultant for Fortune 100 firms, seeking to optimize strategic sourcing, procurement, finance and accounting, and human resources operations. So please join me in welcoming Assistant Secretary Holly Ham to the stage.
Thank you, Constance. Thank you, Constance, for the kind introduction. And good morning to you all. I am truly honored to join you this morning. And today, I stand before you a proud yet humble civil servant, driven by my desire to do right by students across this great country of ours. And if there's one message I want to leave with you today, it is to never forget who we are working for, the American people. And if we make them our number one guiding priority every day, I think everything else will fall into place. I'd like to start by telling you a little bit about myself, where I'm from, my personal and professional background, and how my experience has shaped everything in my life, including my leadership and management style. I grew up in Texas as a young immigrant in a blue-collar family. My father was a machinist in a small oil and gas supplies company, and my mother worked on the assembly line at a food processing plant. They raised 5 children on meager wages, yet put every one of us through a 4-year university program. And they continued to work tirelessly in our adopted country well into their 70s. It was in those early years that I developed a strong work ethic and an aversion to taking things for granted. I knew that if I were to make good on the American promise, I would have to work hard for it and dedicate my life to serving others. And that's certainly one of the reasons I'm here speaking to all of you today. But I didn't start out in the federal government serving others. I began my career as a software engineer, then moved into management consulting, serving my clients. I spent over a decade consulting for Fortune 100 firms in the energy, financial services, auto manufacturing, healthcare, and other industries. And what drove my work then, and still does today, is finding ways to operate more efficiently and improve the bottom line. And the bottom line for my clients then meant dollars and cents. And now in my federal government role, my bottom line is not just dollars and cents. My ultimate goal as Assistant Secretary for Management at Education is to help improve educational outcomes for all students. And to achieve that goal in the most efficient manner possible is my bottom line. After consulting, I spent nearly a decade as a business development and sales executive, helping clients solve business challenges related to customer satisfaction, operations challenges, and digital transformation. By any standard, I had reached a very comfortable professional status, and my career track will continue its upward trajectory. My last position in the private sector before joining the Department of Education was as a sales executive with Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. For all Americans, native and migrants, we all pursue the American dream, and I felt that the American dream that I'd worked so hard to achieve was well within my reach. Still, despite my success, something was missing. I wanted to give back to the country that had given so much to me and my family. So when I was asked to join the new administration, I knew my time had come. Sure, there was a lot of trepidation. It would be such a dramatic change and would involve uprooting me and my family to a completely unfamiliar and admittedly the intimidating surroundings of Washington, D.C. But as one of my role models, Ross Perot, once said, It is the individual's ability to deal with the unexpected that characterizes the difference between success and failure. And I knew that I would regret it if I turned down this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to serve. So you may be wondering, what are some of the key lessons from my experience in the private sector? How do I plan to leverage those lessons in my current role? And what have I learned in the 8 months since I've joined the federal workforce and in my role at the Department of Education? Well, I spent almost 2 decades at EDS and Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. Ross Perot founded the business outsourcing industry with EDS, and in 2008, EDS was acquired by HP. One of the biggest takeaways from my time at HP was the importance of strong leadership, especially in the face of transition and upheaval, and to help ease the impact of dramatic change with that leadership. In October 2014, HP announced that it was going to split into 2 businesses, one for the consumer business focused on PCs and the printers, and the other focused on large enterprises. As expected, it was a great opportunity for HP's competitors to create FUD. And in private enterprise, FUD is the fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And yeah, as in private enterprise, we use awkward-sounding acronyms as well. And competitors wanted HP to be rattled in the market, and especially with existing customers. But what HP's marketing, communications, and client-facing teams did was well thought out and beautifully executed. The split was not scheduled for another 13 months, but the amount of work to separate the behemoth firm, which had over 300,000 employees, and keep the businesses running was just incredible. Every stage in the process, from planning, team formulation, systems updates, and separation, and the actual data split, was carefully communicated to all customers and prospects. Simple, easy-to-understand graphics and details were distributed electronically through mail flyers, face-to-face meetings, and town hall events. Top executives such as Meg Whitman, chairman, CEO, and president at that time, along with all executives and senior vice presidents, went on the road, and they talked about and engaged in as much discussion as possible with clients and prospective clients. Answering questions, thinking about what-ifs, and building customer service capacity was done in a very meaningful and thoughtful manner. And every step of the way, from electronic communications to executive meetings to conferences, placed that FUD that competitors were trying to create as far away from the minds of the marketplace and customers as possible. Engaging customers from start to finish almost single-handedly enabled HP to pull off the move in what many in the industry consider to be a resounding success. The lesson learned in this case is to constantly keep the lines of communication open. This is certainly important in the everyday work situations, but especially meaningful when undertaking monumental change. And so how does this apply to everyone here today? When President Trump took office, he challenged all of us in the federal government to think boldly and innovatively, reviewing our processes and re-envisioning how we do our work in order to best serve the American people. I know that there are many here who have been given the responsibility to help carry out this change. It is a tremendous amount of work and a great amount of change ahead. And when change happens, it creates FUD. And I've found that communication is the best way to ease that fear, uncertainty, and doubt that often accompanies change. It worked in the private sector, and it is equally effective in the federal government. Of course, working with a great group of professionals helps also. In the 8 months since I joined the Department of Education, I have been struck by how much everyone is extremely dedicated and focused on the department's mission to promote student achievement and foster educational excellence. And no doubt that a similar commitment and mission focus is also true for the staff of all of your agencies. It is also very clear to me how much our employees love the program love the work in their program offices, whether it's the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education, the Office of Innovation and Improvement, or the other dozen offices we have at the department. No pun intended, but Ed's workforce is highly educated. We have over 70% of our employees that hold a bachelor's, master's, or a doctorate degree. So with this workforce, I listen to what they have to say. And through all that listening, I have learned a lot and will continue to learn. So while our federal employees are undeniably professional and dedicated to doing the right things, there are some things that we as a department can improve. We can tap into their potential. We can assign them low-risk projects that stretch their skill set. We can cross-train and assign higher-profile projects while they are learning from other leaders. We should be promoting open learning opportunities in a lifelong learning environment. And we should never discourage employees from stepping outside his or her boundary of responsibilities. We should instead encourage it and offer advancements because of it. This applies to our leaders too, and I believe we are not rotating our SES cadre enough to allow for lifelong learning and growth. The private sector does this so well and understands the need to invest in the workforce in ways that benefit the individual and the organization. Businesses know when, where, and how to make investments that further their corporate vision and strengthen their position in the marketplace. But we also need to define what we mean by investments and use the term more comprehensively. Success is never just about more money. It's about strategy and working smarter. Positive change will ensue if, rather than focusing on funding, we in the federal government restructure our teams and allow for more cross-training and leadership development. Yesterday here at Festival, the discussion was on the workforce. Reform is here and the workforce is downsizing. So how are we as agency leaders reshaping and building tomorrow's workforce? I believe we can apply the lessons learned from human capital management used in the private sector and instill a high-performance culture into the federal government. No organization can afford to be complacent, and certainly not the organizations that serve this great country. In the end, whether in the private sector or the federal government, it is all about the people. The people make up the teams, and the people are the stakeholders that we all serve. Most private sector firms do a nice job managing their human capital, and I'd like to see the federal government really focus our efforts on making improvements in our existing dedicated talent. As leaders, we should be continuously learning and seek ways for self-improvement as well. One thing that has benefited me tremendously over the years has been coaching and mentoring by senior executives and peers alike. And the best mentoring relationships were the ones where we both learned from the experience. You all are here helping and shaping the future of the workforce. Don't underestimate the profound impact you have, not just on your fellow employees, but on all the individual constituents your respective agencies represent. Improving your ability to serve American citizenry will help unlock the potential of our nation and make a positive difference for years to come. So thank you for all that you do as leaders in your organizations. I am excited to work alongside all of you with a new agenda of leadership and management. And now, if we have time, I look forward to answering some of your questions. Thank you. I think there's a question right here.
16 years ago, you're in the education department.
Yes.
So 16 years ago, the Bush administration brought in the No Child Left Behind process. So there was tremendous FUD when that came in, and 16 years later, the FUD factor really hasn't changed a whole lot. So in your role, how are you addressing that in terms of management?
That's a great question. As I had stated, my ultimate goal is to help improve education outcomes. In the Office of Management, we're mission support, critical mission support services. And so ESSA is a very, very important part of many other offices, and I support our leaders in the various offices that support it. I mentioned the Office of Elementary and Post-Secondary Education, as well as our Office of Innovation. And so everything that we are doing to support them include bringing on the right resources to help with ensuring we have the staff to review plans, for example, and offering the support services. So in terms of ensuring that we have the staff to support them, and also just the leadership. Whenever there is leadership that's required, we pull in the resources that are available. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, thank you for your service. I'm Kathleen Delano, CEO of PMIC, a woman-owned small business, and I appreciate what you said, having come from the PwC and Deloitte and moving into being called to service. And that is how I feel, mission-driven. As someone who is very interested in bringing in some of those private sector efficiencies and some of the best practices, I would be very interested to know what you would suggest is the best way for those of us who want to help with that Venn diagram of where the overlap can be from best practices in private and best practices in public combined.
That is an excellent question. In fact, Richard Smith, Chief of Staff in my office, is here, and we are working on finding that fit for me, since I'm still relatively new in my role, bringing the best practices and my experience in private enterprise and melding that with what the federal government has. So there are some deep-rooted practices in federal government, the processes, the guidelines, the handbooks, the directives. And with fresh or outside thinking, sometimes the Venn is where we intersect is relatively small, and then sometimes there is a lot of overlap. And so what we're actually doing is to look at best practices in federal government. And so I've challenged my teams around human capital, around processes, to look at what is the rest of federal government doing. Are we at the point where our activities mirror that of best practices in the federal government, and then using actually a lot of benchmark materials from PwC, Booz, Hamilton, Deloitte, and others, look at what are best practices that I'm familiar with in private enterprise. And as we know, federal hiring is a bit different from private sector hiring, and so we do look at where they intersect and look at how we could implement what I'm familiar with in federal practice, and does it work here? Do I still have to go and update policies? Can I do this? Is it legal? And so we do go through those exercises, and it's going to take some time because we may have some debates, and we learn through that process. So we are starting that by pulling best practices in federal government and comparing that to benchmarks in private enterprise. Thank you for your question. Hi.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Hello? Yep. Thank you very much for speaking today.
Thank you.
How are you operationalizing the data in the hiring process, the selection of candidates for rotation, and other advancement and opportunities at the Department of Education? Because, as you said, employee engagement and maximizing potential is important, but how do you use the information at your fingertips to make those decisions?
That is an excellent question. Tom, I am looking at my strategic plan, and I did mention that I feel that we're not rotating our SES professionals enough. The information that we have at the moment is limited. And because the Department of Education is a relatively small agency, we have a little bit less than 4,200 employees now, which means our percentage of SCS is relatively small. And so the data we've collected is early on what is the best way to rotate. So it has a lot to, for me, it has a lot to do with anecdotal information I'm hearing from other leaders, and really looking at, again, maximizing potential. Someone who's doing X for a period of time and very comfortable, what are the skill sets that that leader has that can transfer to another area completely outside of that line of work? And I truly believe that a percentage of it is 90, 95%, because those are core leadership skills. And I don't think there's a lot of that technical that needs to move over to 180 degrees type of role. And so I have not done the analysis myself on that type of data, but I'm looking forward to obtaining a lot of the data so that we could look at, is this an individual that is a strong leader, and we need that into another program office. Because the technical skills will always be there, but the leadership and the management style to fit a new working group, that information isn't available, and that's more about learning and listening and looking at their style to see if there's a fit. Because as you know, there isn't one style of leadership that fits every single group. It's looking at what the objectives are in the challenging areas, and perhaps putting a leader in that may have some experience moving into that other area. I hope that answers your question. I think I have time for perhaps one more question. All right, I think that's it, Constance. Well, thank you very much for having me here. I appreciate all of your time, and I do look forward to working alongside you in this new agenda and this new administration. Thank you.